As a military thriller editor, I see this as a razor-sharp story of sabotage, rank, and survival. Zara Cole is only 22, but she spots what no senior officer bothered to read. A single buried detail that proves a hostage rescue mission is designed to fail. Publicly dismissed and targeted by command, she doesn't back down. She rebuilds the mission, exposes the betrayal, and turns a trap into a rescue no one saw coming.
Get her out of my briefing room. The order from Commander Brett Holloway exploded over the open radio channel like a shockwave. I do not care what it takes. Remove this individual. Every operator at Camp Lemonnier caught his words. Every animal handler and every single canine unit on the base heard the command. What Holloway failed to grasp was that as his order was given, 29 German shepherds all lifted their heads as one. It was not due to a handler's command, but because a single woman had dedicated 3 years to building a bond that no military rank could ever command, and she was standing just beyond the door. If this story is already pulling you in, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss what happens next. Tell me what city you are watching from in the comments below so I can see how far this incredible story travels. Now, we must rewind to the beginning, because to appreciate what Zara Cole did, you have to know who she was. The meeting started at 5:30 in the morning, and Lieutenant Zara Cole was in her chair before the first officer walked in. She was 22 years old. Her dark brown hair was secured in a neat bun, and she was dressed in a plain olive athletic shirt and camouflage pants, her standard gear for early morning training. She was not there to impress anyone. She was assigned as a mission analyst for Operation Clean Sweep, and she had spent the last 72 hours consuming every piece of intel, every satellite photo, and every contractor brief for the operation. She had a better grasp of the plan than the man who designed it. Commander Brett Holloway entered the room at exactly 5:32. He was in his mid-40s and moved with the arrogance of a former star athlete who had spent a decade reliving his glory days. He dropped his binder on the lectern without looking at anyone, pulled up the tactical display, and launched into his speech. Operation Clean Sweep goes live in 40 hours. He announced, "Our objective is a verified site in the Eastern District where 14 civilians are being held. Intelligence confirms an enemy presence of 32 combatants divided between 2 structures. We will push through the northern corridor, extract the hostages, and be clear in under 40 minutes." Zara examined the map. She focused on the northern corridor. Then she gave it a second, harder look. She raised her hand. Holloway kept talking. "The primary extraction route runs through the Bar Market Zone. We will have a 3-vehicle convoy on standby and ready to—" "Commander." Her voice was steady, but it sliced through the room's atmosphere. "I see a problem with that extraction route." Holloway stopped. He glared at her the way a person glares at a sudden, unwelcome noise. "Lieutenant Cole." "Yes, sir. This is a mission overview, not a forum for discussion. I understand that, sir. But the northern road cuts straight through the Bakar market. On a Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, that market will have more than 400 vendors and at least 1,200 shoppers inside. Driving a 3-vehicle convoy through that area during our escape will not reduce our signature. It will amplify it." The room became still. Holloway gave her a long, cold stare. "The intelligence workup approved that route. That workup was finalized on a Friday, sir. It uses foot traffic data gathered on a Saturday. The BAR market is only active from Tuesday to Saturday. The crowd levels for a Saturday and a Tuesday are completely different. I have the correct traffic analysis right here if you wish to see it." Toward the back of the room, someone shifted in their seat. A senior chief named Darren Wyatt, the head of canine operations at Lemonnier for 4 years, glanced up from his tablet. He said nothing, but he was now listening intently. Holloway set his laser pointer on the table with pointed slowness. "Where did you acquire this information?" "From the exact same contractor file your intelligence team used, sir. It is from Meridian Analytics, on page 47. The fine print on the traffic analysis specifies the collection day. It was a Saturday." Holloway's jaw tightened, and you think a small notation on page 47 invalidates a fully vetted operational plan. I think a small notation on page 47 proves that 1,400 civilians will be directly in our path when we need speed and cover. I think that is significant, sir. The tension in the briefing room deepened. A young operator, Marcus Webb, who was 26 and fresh off his second deployment, shot a look at the man next to him. He stayed silent, but his face said it all. Holloway drew himself up to his full height. Lieutenant Cole, this operation has been cleared and authorized by the highest levels of command. Your observation, while noted, does not override those decisions. We are proceeding with the plan as briefed. Zara held his gaze. Sir, if we stick to this plan and we hit resistance in that market, we will be unable to distinguish hostiles from non-combatants. We will be giving the enemy a tactical advantage. They will use the civilians for cover. That is a speculative risk assessment. It is a mathematical fact, sir. The path narrows to just 40 meters at one point. A firefight there with 1,400 civilians is not a risk. It is a guaranteed catastrophe. Holloway's voice dropped. It grew quiet with the kind of calm that powerful men adopt just before they enforce a decision they have already made. Lieutenant Cole, you are dismissed from this briefing. Zara's expression did not change. Sir, you will exit this room immediately and wait outside until I conclude. We will deal with your conduct once this briefing is over. She held his stare for exactly 3 seconds. Then she closed her folder, pushed her chair back, and rose to her feet. Every single person in that room was watching her. 21 operators, 4 analysts, and 2 liaison officers all witnessed a 22-year-old lieutenant leave a room where she was the only one who had been right. She stepped into the hall, and the door closed firmly behind her. She was alone in the corridor, where she took a deep breath. She let the anger rise, then let it go, a skill she had perfected. It had required 2 years of hard discipline, and 1 brutal deployment to master feeling and emotion without ever letting it show. Senior Chief Darren Wyatt was beside her 30 seconds later. He had slipped out a side door and rounded the corner, standing with his arms folded and his voice low. You read that entire Meridian file, did you not? From cover to cover, she confirmed. And the note at the bottom. The note at the bottom. Wyatt nodded slowly. He was a powerfully built man with a shaved head and a long scar that traced a path from his eyebrow to his jaw. After 20 years of service, he measured his words carefully, knowing each one carried weight. You are not wrong, Cole. I am aware that I am not wrong. That is not my point. My point is that you are right, and he knows you are right, and that is the element that is going to be a problem. She looked straight at him. Whose problem? Wyatt ignored her question. Instead, he asked, Are you aware that Meridian Analytics has been the intelligence contractor for every major operation run out of Lemonnier for the past 14 months? That was new information. She filed it away. And are you also aware, he continued, that in those same 14 months, 3 different missions have gone sideways for reasons no one can seem to explain? She became perfectly still. What are you telling me, Senior Chief? He glanced at the briefing room door, then met her eyes again. I am telling you that you found the right thread, Lieutenant. I am also telling you to be extremely careful how you choose to pull on it. Then he turned and disappeared back inside. Zara stood in that hallway for precisely 4 minutes before everything escalated. A crackle came from the radio on the wall. It was the base-wide channel, a broadcast that went to every ops center, every handler station, and every security checkpoint on the camp. Commander Brett Holloway's voice came through, sharp and undeniable. All stations, this is Holloway. I need 2 security personnel to report to the main briefing corridor immediately. I have a junior officer in need of an escort off my base. Deal with this now. The words felt like a physical weight in the air. Zara heard them. She remained completely motionless, absorbing the public humiliation. And in that moment, something happened that Commander Holloway could never have predicted. It was a detail he was incapable of foreseeing, because it required understanding a type of loyalty that his rank had never earned him. From the 9-post 40 meters away, a German shepherd named Remy lifted his head. He had been dozing next to his handler, a 24-year-old specialist named Diego Flores, his partner for the last 18 months. Remy had received no order. His handler had not signaled him, but the dog rose to his feet, turned toward the corridor, and fixed his gaze on the exact spot where Zara was standing. Flores glanced from his dog to the empty hall, then back to his dog. "What is it that you know?" he whispered. From the eastern K9 station, 2 more shepherds rose to their feet. Then 3 more joined from the outer guard post. Each of their handlers noticed it. Every last one of them saw it. Wyatt emerged from the side door, moving much faster than before. His face was set. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "I heard it," Zara confirmed. "He sent that over the open channel." "I know." Wyatt's voice was low and serious as he looked at her. "Cole, in 20 years of service, I have never heard a commander talk about a junior officer like that on an open frequency. Not even once. What he did was not just a removal order. He just tried to publicly disgrace an officer in front of the whole base." Zara's voice was quiet. "I know what this is, Senior Chief. So, what do you intend to do?" Her eyes scanned the long corridor. She saw Flores standing beside Remy. The dog was still focused on her, its golden eyes steady and calm, as if it understood everything. "I am going to stand right here," she stated clearly. "I am not going anywhere." Wyatt studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. He raised his radio, switched to the handler channel, and spoke 3 simple words. "All units, to the corridor." The events of the next 4 minutes would become a moment Commander Brett Holloway could never explain for the rest of his career. 29 operators appeared from rooms, stairways, and side passages. They came from the East Barracks, the Supply Depot, and the Secondary Intel Center. They all came because they had heard the open broadcast. They all came because they knew Zara Cole. They all came because some principles in the service are more important than rank. And one of those principles is witnessing a superior publicly shame a junior officer for speaking the truth. They assembled in the hallway directly behind her. No one said a word. Nothing needed to be said. 29 operators in a hallway is a message in itself. And in front of each handler, a German shepherd sat at attention, watching the door. They waited, calm and ready. Holloway's voice crackled over the radio again. "Where is my security detail?" The only reply was silence. The door at the end of the hall swung open, and Commander Brett Holloway walked through, coming face to face with the formation waiting for him. He froze. His eyes swept over the operators. He scanned the dogs. His gaze finally landed on Zara Cole, who stood in the center, a folder under her arm, her expression unnervingly calm. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Zara met his eyes. "This is the response you asked for, sir." Commander Brett Holloway was not a man who rattled easily. He had spent 23 years in the military, learning to hold his ground when the world was falling apart. But in that hallway, looking at 29 operators and a line of German shepherds staring back, with the same quiet, firm resolve, he felt a sensation he had not known in a very long time. The floor seemed to shift under him. He recovered in an instant. Men like Holloway always do. He straightened his shoulders and aimed a finger at Zara. "Lieutenant Cole, this is an unauthorized assembly. I am ordering everyone in this hall to return to your stations immediately." Nobody moved. Not an operator, not a handler, and not one dog. Holloway's jaw clenched. "I said, return to your posts. That is a direct order." Senior Chief Darren Wyatt took a step forward. He walked with the slow, sure confidence that is earned through a lifetime of proven bravery. He stopped a few feet from Holloway, his eyes locked on him. "Sir, with all due respect, you broadcast a humiliating personal order over an open base channel. Every person in this hall heard it. What you are seeing is not an unauthorized assembly. It is the direct result of your own actions. Holloway's voice became cold and sharp. Senior Chief Wyatt, you are about 30 seconds away from making the biggest mistake of your career. I have made bigger ones, Wyatt replied evenly. Somewhere behind Zara, someone made a noise that sounded like a held-back laugh. Marcus Webb, the young operator from the briefing, stood 3 rows deep, his arms crossed, his face a perfect picture of calm. But his eyes were alert and sharp. Holloway shifted his focus back to Zara. You think this is loyalty? All these people defending you? No, sir, she answered. I think this is accountability. There is a difference. You are a 22-year-old lieutenant who walked out of a classified briefing and somehow created this mess. I was ordered out of that briefing by you, sir, on a public channel, right after I reported a confirmed safety flaw with the northern extraction route. That flaw was reviewed and dismissed. By who, sir? You dismissed it yourself in less than 4 seconds without looking at my data. That is not a review, that is a rejection. Holloway moved a step closer. He was 8 inches taller than her and always used his size to intimidate. Lieutenant, you have one last chance to back down, get yourself together, and respect the proper chain of command. Zara did not move back an inch. And I am giving you one chance, sir, to explain to 29 operators and their canine units why Meridian Analytics has been the only intelligence contractor for all Camp Lemonnier operations for the last 14 months, and why 3 of those operations ended in failures that are still classified. The hallway went completely still. It was the type of quiet that fills a room when everyone holds their breath at once. Holloway's face changed. The shift was tiny. A civilian would not have seen it, but 29 trained operators who specialized in reading people under pressure saw it perfectly. Something behind his eyes had changed. It was much less like anger and much more like fear. Diego Flores, standing with Remy, saw it first. He glanced at Wyatt, who had seen it too. Who told you that information? Holloway asked. His voice was different now. The authoritative tone was gone, replaced by something tight and defensive. You did, sir, Zara said. I brought up Meridian Analytics and 3 failed missions. You did not deny it. It was one of the most masterful moves anyone in that hallway had ever seen. Webb looked at the operator next to him with an expression that said he would remember this moment forever. Holloway drew a sharp breath. He straightened his posture. He made his decision. This conversation is finished. I am placing Lieutenant Cole on administrative hold, pending a complete conduct review. Wyatt, you will be in my office in 1 hour. The rest of you are dismissed. He turned around and walked back into the room. The room he went into was not a place to relax. It was where he used a secure line to call a number that was not listed in any official directory for Camp Lemonnier. No one in the hall knew this yet, but Remy knew something was not right. Remy was trained to detect chemicals and stress. When the door clicked shut, he turned his head and stared at it, the way he was trained to watch a threat. Diego Flores noticed his dog's reaction, but remained silent. Wyatt faced Zara. Administrative hold. I heard him. That means he will try to hide this with paperwork before anyone higher up learns what was said on that channel. Then we need someone senior to him to know right away, she answered. Wyatt looked at her with a mix of respect and worry. Cole, do you realize what you are asking me to do? I am asking you to make a phone call, Senior Chief. No, I am asking if you realize what happens because of that call. She looked directly at him. I realize that 14 civilians are inside a building, waiting for rescue in 40 hours. I also realize that if we stick to the current plan for the northern route, people will certainly die for no reason. I realize that someone with a financial interest in this mission wants that plan to continue without any changes. And I realize that every single person here heard Brett Holloway insult me on an open channel, and not one of them walked away. She paused. So yes, Senior Chief, I know exactly what happens after that phone call. Wyatt was quiet for a moment. Then he took out his personal cell phone. Not the base radio, not his work phone, but his own. He found a contact and pressed the dial button. Webb leaned toward the man beside him, a veteran named T.J. Garrett, with 14 years and 4 deployments. Who was he calling? Garrett answered without turning his head. Someone Holloway has no power over. The phone call took only 45 seconds. Wyatt said very little. He gave a name. He gave a date. He used the words open channel, Meridian Analytics, and Northern Extraction Route. He then listened for about 30 seconds, said, "Understood, sir," and hung up. He looked at Zara. "You have 2 hours." "For what?" "For someone very high up to start asking quiet questions. After that, things will get very loud." She nodded. "Then we will make use of these 2 hours." What happened during that time was what Holloway would later describe as an unauthorized parallel operational planning session at his hearing. What it actually was Zara Cole in the secondary intel room with 7 operators, 4 handler teams, and Senior Chief Wyatt, completely rebuilding Operation Clean Sweep from the ground up. Zara opened the mission briefing from Meridian Analytics once more. Her eyes went straight to page 47, where she found a tiny note and read it aloud. It said the traffic survey ran on a Saturday, from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. The report estimated 400 to 600 civilians would be in the area. Webb motioned to the map. "But our operation is on a Tuesday," he noted. Tuesday is the busiest market day in the Bakar district. Sellers arrive at 5 in the morning. The crowds are thickest between 6:30 and 9 a.m. Zara's voice was firm. "During our mission, the number of people there will not be 400 to 600. She flipped the page. "It will be closer to 2,400. Garrett leaned in, his expression grim. "That is not a mistake in the fine print. That is a deliberate lie." Zara agreed. "It is a lie someone at Meridian was betting nobody would ever find. Because whoever reads to page 47 of a report," Flores called out from the back of the room. "You do," he added. "I do," Zara quietly affirmed. She then changed the subject to the secondary location, an area Holloway's plan had completely ignored. She had noted it as suspicious before, but had set it aside. Now she displayed the satellite images on the table for everyone to see. "Look at this building," she instructed, pointing at the photo. Meridian called it an empty storage facility. "No activity." Garrett nodded. "It certainly looks empty." "It looks that way if you only check on a weekend," she countered. "Notice the shadows on the east side? They reveal a second building that is missing from the official plans. And there is something else." She pointed to a tiny detail in the image's corner. "The vents have been upgraded. That is the type of system used for occupied buildings." An immediate hush fell over the group. Webb's voice was low and steady. "So the target is not where they told us it would be. There is a strong chance they are not," she confirmed. "They might be in a structure Meridian pretended did not exist." Flores stood up, his posture rigid. "If Holloway sticks to his strategy, he will raid an empty complex. Or even worse, he is leading his men into a trap." The weight of her words settled on the room. Wyatt chose his words carefully. "Cole, if you are right, this is more than just a bad plan. This mission was designed to fail from the very beginning." She looked directly at him. "I know. This was no accident. This is sabotage," he concluded. "I know," she said again. Garrett leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling. 14 hostages. 40 hours to save them, Zara reminded them softly. "And a route designed to get our team killed well before we reach our objective." Webb looked around at Wyatt, Garrett, Flores, and Remy. He noticed the other handlers along the walls, their dogs quiet and alert. Finally, he looked at Zara. "Okay, what do we do?" Her focus returned to the map. She had already worked out a new plan in her head while Holloway was talking. She had it all prepared before he even finished his speech, putting the pieces together while the others were still processing the flawed intelligence. She picked up a marker and started outlining the new approach on the map. Roughly 6 minutes into her presentation, the door opened. It was not her superior, Holloway. A man in his 50s stood there in casual clothes with no insignia. but his presence demanded immediate authority. He stopped at the entrance, surveying the room. His gaze fell on the map, then on Zara Cole, who was briefing a group of men with a total of 29 years in the field. He finally spoke. "Do not stop. I am interested in hearing your plan." Wyatt instantly stood at attention. Webb unconsciously sat up taller. Garrett, with 14 years of service, looked at the man, and his surprise shifted to a look of dawning awareness. Zara just met the newcomer's stare. She did not know who this person was. In less than a minute, she would find out his name. That discovery would change everything over the next 36 hours. For the moment, she simply held his gaze and spoke without hesitation. "Sir, the route to the north is a suicide mission. The primary target is a decoy, and someone in this unit knew that before we started." The man walked in, grabbed a chair, and sat down. "Then show me," he challenged. His name was Rear Admiral James Corbin. He had not traveled 14 hours from Bahrain to sit in a spare briefing room over a small disagreement. He came all this way because Darren Wyatt had uttered 2 key words on a secure phone line that was no longer supposed to be active. For 11 long months, James Corbin had been waiting for someone to finally say them. He positioned himself at the table's head and listened to Zara Cole without a single interruption. This simple gesture was a powerful signal to everyone present. Senior commanders always cut in. It is what they do. They demand details, redirect conversations, or point out errors. Corbin remained silent. He watched her lay out the plan on the map, his face giving nothing away. When she finished, the room was quiet. Corbin studied the satellite image for a long moment. He then looked at Wyatt. "When did she receive this report?" 72 hours ago, sir. Holloway's team had it first." Wyatt's expression was unreadable. "The strategy was submitted for approval 6 days ago. The man who signed off on it was Holloway's top intelligence officer. An officer who was a former employee of Meridian Analytics," Zara interjected. Corbin's head snapped toward her. "Say that again." "Captain Derek Sims, Holloway's intel officer, worked at Meridian Analytics for 11 years before enlisting. He is the person who gave the green light to this whole mission plan. The same plan with the false traffic numbers on page 47 and the concealed building in the photos." A stillness came over Corbin. "How did you learn about Sims's professional background?" "It is in his public biography, sir, on the internal base network. Hardly anyone reads past the first paragraph." Webb almost choked back a sound. Garrett focused his gaze on the table. Corbin put his hands down flat on the surface. He looked like someone who had just watched a locked door swing wide open after nearly a year of shoving against it. "Lieutenant Cole, are you implying that the intelligence firm, the approving officer, and the strategy itself are all connected?" "I am just stating the facts from the records, sir. It is your job to form the conclusion." It was an impeccable answer, and every veteran in the room recognized it. She was not speculating or making accusations she could not prove. She laid out the information and let her superior take charge. Corbin exchanged a silent, meaningful glance with Wyatt. "Where is Holloway right now?" Corbin asked. "He is in his office, sir. He placed Lieutenant Cole on administrative leave a couple of hours ago." "Does he know you are here?" "No, sir." Corbin stood up. "Good. We will maintain that advantage." He faced Zara. "You said there was another way in." "Yes, sir. Show me." She went back to the map. She worked with her typical efficiency, without any wasted motion or theatrics. She laid out the southern approach via a service road and a new exit point near the east fence. She presented an adjusted timeline that moved the team through the danger zone before the market became packed with civilians. She went over the evidence of the secret compound, the new ventilation, the telltale shadows, and the omission in the report. Corbin asked 3 sharp, specific questions. His questions made it clear he was not just listening, he was testing her strategy, checking for any weakness before committing to it. She provided an immediate answer for all 3. He nodded once. "How many personnel do you need?" She answered instantly. 22 soldiers and 4 canine units. "Why do you need 4 dog teams?" "If that secret building contains hostiles and explosives, I want 4 dogs searching, not 2. Remy's team has the top detection rate on the base. I need him at the front. At the back of the room, Flores seemed to grow an inch. Corbin looked at Wyatt. Can you assemble a team in 36 hours? In 24, sir. Get it done. He pulled out his phone and made a call that lasted less than a minute. When he was finished, Operation Clean Sweep had a new commander, and Brett Holloway had no idea. In that moment, the whole operation changed. But the next event was a complete surprise to everyone. Captain Derek Sims walked into the room. He carried himself with the smug assurance of someone who believes every door is open to him. He failed to knock or notice the charged atmosphere, convinced he was always welcome. He took 3 steps in before he saw the Admiral. He stopped so suddenly his assistant nearly ran into him. The aide took one look, grasped the gravity of the scene, and wisely backed out of the doorway. Sims, on the other hand, was trapped. Captain Sims was trapped. Admiral Corbin, he said, his voice steady but showing a slight crack. I was not aware you were on the base, sir. That was by design, Captain. Corbin's eyes swept across the room, over the map and the satellite photos. His gaze lingered for just a fraction of a second on the red circle over the hidden compound. It was a tiny pause that most would miss, but Zara saw it, Garrett saw it, and Wyatt had been watching every single move Sims made. I am going to ask you to leave the room, Captain, Corbin said. We will contact you at the appropriate time. Sir, this briefing is for a live mission, and I am the assigned intelligence officer. I have the clearance for clean sweep planning. You had clearance, Corbin corrected him. Captain, please exit the room. The atmosphere in the room turned cold. Sims froze where he stood. In that moment, everyone saw him mentally calculating what he knew, what they knew, and if he could get away with it. He left. The door clicked shut. Webb breathed a sigh of relief. He will be making a call the second he is in that hallway. Yes, he will, Corbin said, already on his own phone. He was calling the compound's security office with a brief and final message. Captain Sims would find that no one was answering his calls that day. No one at the other end of any line would pick up for him. By the time he was dialing contacts from his office, every sensitive number related to Camp Lemonnier had been silently rerouted. The new line was answered by people whose only job was to listen. Zara knew none of this. She only knew the door was shut, Corbin was moving quickly, and the mission was changing right in front of her. She focused on what she could control. She went back to the map and her work. Flores was the one who saw it first. He stood with his dog Remy, who had been relaxed for the past hour, which was normal. But about 4 minutes after Sims left, Remy stood up from his sitting position to face the door. His ears perked. His posture shifted from relaxed to ready. It was a subtle change that Diego Flores knew like his own heartbeat. Remy, Flores said softly. The dog paid no attention, his eyes fixed on the door. Flores moved quietly to Wyatt's side. Senior Chief, Wyatt leaned in. Remy is alerting on the door. Wyatt looked at the dog, and then to the door. Chemical stress signals, high cortisol. He is trained for that. Wyatt then spoke to the guard at the entrance. Check the hallway. Now, be discreet. The guard slipped out and came back in 18 seconds. Sims is at the East Comms terminal, 2 doors away. Wyatt looked at Corbin. Sir. Corbin glanced at Remy, then at Flores. Your dog alerted on him? Yes, sir. For a stress reaction, high cortisol, and behavioral indicators of deception. Sir, his training follows the Naval Criminal Investigative Service Protocol. He does not flag simple nervousness. He alerts on the specific physical signs of active concealment. The room absorbed this news in complete silence. Corbin's voice was flat. Active concealment. Yes, sir, Garrett confirmed from his chair. The dog exposed him. It was not a question. It was the kind of statement made when reality shifts, and everyone knows the story has completely changed. Corbin stood up straighter. He turned to Zara. Your plan? How long until you can brief the whole team? 2 hours, she answered. You have 90 minutes. She nodded, and began working immediately. Wyatt was already on his radio, calling the team leaders. Webb was on his feet before Wyatt had even finished his sentence. The room shifted from still to a flurry of purpose in less than 10 seconds. It is how highly skilled people move when a decision is made and the clock is running. In the middle of it all, Corbin paused next to Zara for only 3 seconds. He offered no congratulations, no praise for her work. His only instruction was a request for a full written report detailing every document she had marked since reading that single footnote. She just looked at him and said, "Yes, sir." He then clarified, "This is not for a performance review. This is for an investigation." In that instant, she understood this was no longer about Operation Clean Sweep. The situation had evolved into something much older, something that had been growing for 14 months through 3 failed missions and a defense contractor with a very comfortable and profitable deal. And the whole thing was uncovered because of a footnote on page 47 that a single 22-year-old lieutenant had bothered to read. About 40 minutes into her briefing, while Zara was walking the team through her plan, the base intercom came to life. It was Holloway's voice. "All units," Commander Holloway speaking. "I am resuming command of Operation Clean Sweep, effective immediately. All current planning will halt. Lieutenant Cole is to report to my office with an escort, now." The room went completely silent. No one made a move. Zara stopped talking for 2 seconds and looked at the intercom. Then she faced the map again and continued as if he had not spoken. Webb looked at Garrett. Garrett stared down at his hands. Flores watched Remy, who had not moved and was sitting attentively, his calm amber eyes focused on Zara. In a corner, Corbin was on his phone, his voice a low murmur and his face impossible to read. When Holloway's second announcement came 6 minutes later, Corbin had already ended his call. He walked to the center of the room, waiting for Zara to pause. She looked at him. He said, "Commander Holloway has been relieved of his command, pending a formal inquiry by the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. That inquiry will include the Meridian Analytics contract, the brief, and 3 other operations." He paused. "Lieutenant Cole, you are now in operational command of Clean Sweep. Proceed." The room was perfectly still. Webb glanced at the ceiling. Garrett put both hands on the table and let out a long breath. Flores looked at Remy, who turned his head to look back, as if the dog knew exactly what had just happened. Zara held Corbin's gaze for 3 seconds. Then she turned to the room and said, "We launch in 32 hours. This is how we are going to do it." The 32 hours that followed were the most demanding of Zara Cole's life. She did not sleep for even a minute of them. There was far too much that needed to be done. She was now in charge of a mission built on a lie, and she was rebuilding it in real time with a team that had chosen her over their commander less than a day ago. That choice would have consequences for every one of them. She knew it, and refused to let their faith be for nothing. She went over the briefing 3 times, not because the team needed it, but because on the 3rd review, she found a critical flaw in the extraction plan. It would have put 2 of their vehicles in the same vulnerable spot for 60 seconds. She fixed it before anyone else noticed. She corrected it and said nothing, because a leader who points out every problem they solve is not building trust. Wyatt saw it. He saw everything. After the briefing, he approached her and said quietly, "Good correction on the Eastern Junction." She looked at him. Yes, that would have been a very bad minute. He just nodded. The conversation was complete. At hour 18, Webb came to see her. He found her at the planning table, looking at the compound images for the 11th time. He sat down across from her without asking. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "When you first saw that footnote on page 47, did you know what it really meant?" She kept her eyes on the image. "I knew it meant the route was wrong." "That is not my question." She finally looked up at him. He was 26 years old, with 2 tours behind him and eyes that asked intelligent questions. She respected him for that. "No," she admitted. "I did not think it was sabotage. I assumed it was carelessness. I thought someone wrote a poor brief and nobody checked the work. So when did you realize it was more? When Holloway refused to examine the data. I gave him the folder with all the proof, and he dismissed it in 4 seconds without opening it. She paused. A commander who made a mistake has a very different look than a commander who is hiding a lie. Holloway had the second look. Webb was quiet for a moment, and you could see it. I have been reading people my whole life, she said. It was the first skill I learned to help me survive, long before I ever joined the service. He did not ask her to say more. With a simple nod, he stood and went back to his work. She returned to the images on her screen, and the topic was closed. 26 hours into the mission clock, Corbin appeared. He was not checking on her. His purposeful walk signaled he was bringing fresh intel, and at this stage, new information was almost never good news. He took a seat across from her. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service has reached out to 3 ex-employees of Meridian Analytics in the past 8 hours. 2 are talking. She waited for him to continue. The northern route was not an error, he stated. They deliberately used Saturday's traffic data because it showed fewer civilians. The intel package was engineered to make that route look like the safest option for a Tuesday morning. Corbin laid out the devastating details. The convoy would have driven into a marketplace crowded with 1,400 people. The entire mission would have been a disaster. In the chaos that followed, the real target, the safe house with the hostages, would have been completely missed. He paused, allowing the gravity of the information to sink in. The enemy holding those 14 people expects us to come from the north. They are clueless that we know about the second compound. The realization struck her like a physical blow. The enemy had their playbook. They knew every move. Corbin confirmed her worst fear. Someone on the inside had talked. Suddenly, the air in the room felt thick and heavy. The true scope of the danger was now horrifyingly obvious, much bigger and darker than she ever imagined. She breathed the name, Sims. Corbin gave a solemn nod, confirming her guess. Sims, and no fewer than 2 others from the contractor. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service is handling it. His eyes locked with hers. While the enemy has the original plan, they know nothing about your revision. That is your advantage, Lieutenant. It is the only one that matters. Make it count. She met his gaze without flinching. We will, sir. He stood up to go, then stopped. He turned around, delivering one last piece of shocking news. You should be aware that Holloway registered a formal complaint against you. He cited insubordination, unprofessional conduct, and unauthorized mission planning. She absorbed the information, her expression unchanging. What about the complaint? She asked. It has been filed, he answered, in his record, which has now reached 200 pages. For one intense moment, their eyes connected. Just execute the mission, Lieutenant. That is all that matters. And with that, he left. She took 30 seconds to process what he said before turning back to the task at hand. The operation began at 4:30 in the morning. A deep, focused quiet fell over the base, the type of silence that happens when everyone knows the stakes are real. 22 operators prepared to move out, with 4 K9 teams alongside them. At the head of the group, Remy was with Diego Flores, a still silhouette in the pre-dawn gloom. Zara turned to her unit. She did not deliver a big motivational speech. Those were for commanders unsure of their own plans. She just gave them 4 direct statements. 14 people are inside that building, hoping for a rescue they are not sure will arrive. Our enemy thinks they have our playbook. They are wrong. Let's move. It was all that was necessary. While climbing aboard the transport, Webb looked over at Garrett. Just 4 sentences, he noted. Garrett checked his equipment. 4 was enough. The vehicles rolled out, taking the southern path she had mapped out 30 hours earlier. There would be no northern route, no crowded market, and no 1,400 innocent people caught in the crossfire. Their approach was clear, putting them 4 minutes ahead of their timeline. When they reached the 800-meter mark, Remy gave a quiet alert. It was not a bark of aggression, but a precise, learned signal that people were nearby. Flores lifted his hand into a fist. Instantly, the whole team knelt as one, a seamless and silent movement. Zara moved up to his position. What has he got? Flores never took his eyes off the dog, who was testing the wind. He is picking up several individuals inside. He is trying to differentiate them. A few moments passed, and then Flores understood. They are stressed. High cortisol levels. These are not combatants. It is the hostages, Zara thought. That is what the dog is saying. Her gaze shifted from the target building to her unit before she gave two silent commands with her hands. The team flowed into their entry positions, exactly as they had practiced. Remy and Flores moved to point on the right flank. She was counting on the dog's sense of smell to identify who was on the other side of every door. What happened over the next 22 minutes would eventually be recorded in sterile, technical after-action reports, stripping away the raw reality. But one event, a single instant that would be seared into the memory of everyone present, was about to happen. It came at the 14-minute mark. At a door near the back of the building, Flores and Remy came to a halt. The dog assumed a firm, seated posture. This specific conditioned signal had only one meaning. There were people alive inside. Flores looked to Zara for the command. She studied the door for a second before giving a short nod. The door swung open, revealing 14 hostages. The sound that erupted from the room was unlike anything they could have prepared for in training. It was a sound of hope returning to those who believed they had been abandoned. It was the sound of overwhelming, unvarnished, human relief. Zara was the first one through the doorway and into that room. She scanned the room, counting 14 civilians, 12 of them men and 2 women. A few were on their feet, but most were not. Her evaluation was complete in under 3 seconds. 4 in critical condition, 10 mobile, but all of them alive. She locked onto the closest man, maybe 50 years old and shaking uncontrollably. He just looked at her, finding it hard to accept that she was really there. She got down on one knee to be at his level. "We are with the United States Navy," she told him in a steady voice. "You are out of danger. We are here to bring you home." He grabbed her arm tightly. His grip was weak, but his gaze was powerful. "We heard them talking," he said, his voice shaking. "Last night. They knew the Americans were coming for the market. They said they were ready." She looked directly at him. They were waiting in the wrong place. The man stared back, the meaning of her words slowly registering. "You changed the plan." "Yes," she affirmed. "We did." His eyes then fell to Remy, who was carefully moving among the hostages, calmly assessing each one. One woman reached out a hand to the dog. Remy stopped and let her press her face into his thick coat, a soft cry of relief escaping her. Zara got to her feet and glanced at Flores. He was watching his canine partner with the woman. "He always knows what they need," he said quietly. The full evacuation of the hostages took only 11 minutes. Every one of the 14 hostages was evacuated from the building without incident. The 4 with the most severe injuries were stabilized before arriving at the medical tent. The team suffered 0 casualties among both the operators and the canine units. The entire mission was over in 33 minutes. As the final hostage was secured for transport, Wyatt came up beside her. He watched the vehicles prepare to leave for a while before he spoke. 33 minutes. 34 until we are in the clear, she amended. Holloway's strategy would have cost them 40 minutes at an empty target. She did not have to say another word. The success of the mission spoke for itself. Just then, her radio crackled. It was Corbin on the line. His voice had its usual precision, but she noticed a different tone underneath, one she could not recall hearing from him before. "Cole, report your status." "All 14 hostages are safe," she answered. "Extraction complete. We are returning to base." A short silence followed. "Good work, Lieutenant." She clicked her microphone twice in response, and then climbed into the transport. Webb was seated across from her. He watched her expression, but did not speak. By now, he knew that Zara needed to process things on her own. The best support he could offer was his quiet presence. And so he remained there, quietly available. Beside him, Garrett rested his head back, his eyes shut, a slight smile playing on his lips. It was the honest expression of a soldier relieved that an operation had gone perfectly. Further back, Remy lay next to Flores. The dog sensed his job was done and was finally at ease. Zara gazed out at the passing night. Her thoughts drifted to page 47 of the mission documents. She recalled a single footnote hidden within a dense chart of numbers. Whoever wrote it probably figured that nobody would be reading that closely at 5:30 in the morning. She remembered the hostage grabbing her arm and confirming the enemy was expecting them at the market. She thought about the other possibility, the one where she had kept her concerns to herself during the briefing. It would have been easier to just quietly question the northern approach and move on. After all, speaking out is not something the military rewards. The entire structure is founded on the idea that a higher rank means you are always right. The more senior the commander, the more their truth is treated as fact. A 22-year-old lieutenant is expected to obey, not to question a senior officer's bad strategy, but her entire life had prepared her for that single act of courage. 14 people were now safe and heading home because of one tiny detail, one brave decision, and 29 operators who chose to follow the truth instead of the chain of command. Zara gave herself 30 seconds to let the wind sink in. Then she pulled out her notebook and started writing the report for Corbin, who would want every detail. While she worked, Webb looked at Garrett. Garrett glanced at Zara, writing quickly in the dim light of the transport only 30 minutes after pulling off a rescue from a hidden location. He closed his eyes, content. Yeah, he muttered softly. That was it. The official review started at 7:30 in the morning and continued well into the afternoon. Zara sat at the head of the conference table in the command center, answering each question with the same intense clarity she had shown for the last 72 hours. She fielded questions from Corbin's team, from a pair of Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents who had flown in, and from a lawyer assigned to draft the formal record. She handled it all by herself, without a lawyer or any prepared notes. Her only resources were the notebook she carried in the field, and in flawless recall of every event since that first briefing where she spoke up. For 2 hours, Wyatt watched from the back wall, a silent figure nobody acknowledged. In charge was Agent Patricia Hale, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had studied the Meridian file long before this. Facing Zara, her questions were like daggers. Lieutenant Cole, did you know Captain Sims was tied to Meridian when you raised your concerns? Zara's reply was firm. No, Mom. Were you aware of the 3 prior mission failures? Not the details. Senior Chief Wyatt brought them up later, but that was it. So why did you read to page 47? Zara held her gaze. I read the whole report. Hale paused. Most officers do not. I know, Zara said. They counted on that. Hale wrote a long note, thinking it over. She looked up again. The footnote. Explain exactly what you saw and concluded. So Zara laid it all out. The weekend pickup, the weekday market, the lie about 400 to 600 captives when it was really 1,400. She presented the facts just as she did in the briefing, without emotion or guesswork. Agent Hale listened without interruption. Once Zara finished, Hale observed, You created an entire new plan from that single error. The footnote pointed to the problem, Zara clarified. All the other intelligence was already there. The building photos, the light analysis, the air system schematics. I did not make anything up. I simply read the report. Meridian Analytics sent that file knowing the truth was buried inside. They bet on no one looking that closely. That is a critical difference. Agent Hale set her pen aside. She studied Zara for a long time, her expression unreadable. Lieutenant, our investigation has lasted 11 months. You are the only one who saw what they buried. Silence filled the space between them. Zara remained quiet. It was not a compliment, just a fact. She took it that way. Later that day, she was formally charged with insubordination, misconduct, and running an unauthorized operation. The review was over in 40 minutes. Zara was in the break room, staring at a wall. It was her first coffee in 36 hours. Wyatt sat with her, holding a file. "Legal tossed out all 3 charges," he said flatly. She looked at the folder. "Why?" "Because you were following a humiliating public order from a superior. Because Admiral Corbin backed your planning session afterward. And because nobody can argue with the mission's success." He let her absorb the news. 14 for 14, Cole. 0 casualties, 33 minutes. She gripped her mug. "What about Holloway?" "Relieved of command during the investigation. They have Sims in custody. Investigators are now looking at the whole Meridian organization. They think this problem is much bigger than this base." He paused. "They think this has happened before, information being sold to the enemy." As the truth landed, she remembered Wyatt's comment about 3 other failed operations, the ones he never detailed. She thought about the soldiers from those teams who did not come home. "How many?" she breathed. It was not really a question. Wyatt understood her meaning perfectly. "They are still counting," he said quietly. She put her mug down, her posture stiff. "I only read a footnote," she whispered. "You read a footnote," Wyatt agreed. "Then you held your ground, and 29 operators backed your play." He leaned closer. "Cole, that footnote was the trigger, but it was useless until you pulled it." She looked at him. He was 20 years older, with more experience than she could fathom. He had the look of a man passing a torch. This was not about rank. It was about something deeper. "This happened because of you," he said. "All of it." She did not argue. She just raised her mug and drank, feeling the moment's heaviness. An hour later, Webb, Garrett, and Flores came in. Flores's dog, Remy, was right with them. The dog walked to Zara, sat, and leaned against her leg. It was a simple gesture of acceptance. She looked down at him. She placed a hand on his head. "He does not do that with just anyone," Flores noted. "I know," she answered. "How did you?" She looked at Remy. "He knew something was wrong in that hall before any of us. I figured if he was watching me, I had better watch him." Flores looked at his dog with wonder, still amazed by his partner's instinct after 18 months. Garrett sat down. "Investigators will want more from all of us." "I assumed so," she said. "This will drag on." "I know. Are you ready?" She thought about it seriously. This was not a quick fight, but a long, slow grind of giving testimony. "No," she said honestly, "but I am doing it anyway." A smile finally appeared on Webb's face, changing his whole expression. "Yeah," he said. "I knew you would." 3 weeks later, Zara was in a formal hearing in Bahrain. Rear Admiral Corbin led a panel of 5 officers she did not know. They studied a file that boiled 72 hours of her life down to facts on paper. Corbin read the report aloud. He went over the timeline, the bad intel, the buried footnote, the hallway confrontation, the 29 operators who stood by her, the new strategy, and the mission's outcome. His tone was perfectly even. When he finished, he set the papers down. "Lieutenant Zara Cole," he started. "This panel reviewed every aspect of Operation Clean Sweep, from your conduct to its success." He paused deliberately. "All charges against you are dismissed and erased from your file. Your command choices have been officially validated." He waited another moment. "The panel's decision is unanimous." He looked straight at her. "Effective immediately, you are promoted to lieutenant commander." The room was almost empty. This was business, not a party. There were no cheers or clapping. It was just Corbin, 5 officers, a recorder, and Wyatt, who was present again without explanation. Zara stood straight, absorbing it all. "Lieutenant Commander." She remembered the briefing room at 5:30 in the morning. She saw her own hand in the air when nobody wanted it there. She recalled the hallway, the call on the radio, and the commander certain he could end her future. She saw the 29 faces that had her back. She saw a dog who sensed the danger first. And she remembered page 47. Corbin stood up, and the panel did the same. He approached her and offered his hand. While they shook, he said softly, "You never needed our approval, Lieutenant Commander, but this makes your actions a precedent for others." She held his gaze. "And it is for the ones who did not come back from the last 3 missions," she added. He looked at her, understanding. "Yes," he said. "For them." That was the real win. It was not the rank or the handshake. It was giving a voice to the lost, the soldiers sacrificed to lies buried in fine print that no one else bothered to read. She spoke for them. She always would. It was a duty without an end. Wyatt was in the hall, leaning against a wall with his arms crossed. He looked relaxed, like he had not just sat through a 2-hour hearing. When she came out, he said, "Lieutenant Commander Cole." She met his gaze. "Senior Chief Wyatt." He uncrossed his arms and extended a hand. She took it. He held her grip for a moment. "Keep reading the footnotes." She looked straight at him. "I never stopped." He nodded once, sharply. Nothing more needed to be said. At Camp Lemonnier, inside the dog kennel, where it all started, Remy was on his mat. That night, his partner, Diego Flores, came in and told him the whole story. Flores knew perfectly well that dogs do not get promotions or ranks. He told him anyway. After 18 months with a partner who could smell deceit and find 14 people by scent alone, he knew Remy understood what mattered. The dog had earned the right to hear it. Remy raised his head and looked directly at Flores. Then he lowered his head onto his paws. Flores sat on his bunk, gazing at his partner. "You knew, did not you?" he murmured. And that is exactly how a 22-year-old lieutenant found her voice in a room that was determined to silence her. She did not have a high rank, nor was the system on her side. She did not have the confident certainty that people assume all leaders must feel. All she possessed was a single document, one tiny footnote, and the willpower to hold her ground when every force pushed her to retreat. 29 people supported her, proving that the truth is powerful, even when it is inconvenient. 14 civilians returned home safely because a single person chose to pay attention. And a German shepherd named Remy sensed something was wrong long before any human being in that camp knew what to ask. This shows that loyalty does not wait for a command. True courage does not come from a title. And the truth, even when hidden on page 47 in a note nobody was supposed to find, will always find the person who is still looking. If this story moved you, if it was a reminder that your voice matters, please subscribe now so you do not miss another. And we would love for you to leave a comment with your city and the word Amen, so we can see just how far this story has reached and know that it resonated with you. Because some stories are meant to be shared with every part of the world.